11-year-old Nurassyl Primbetov is playing Magnus Carlsen in this match. So Magnus starts the game with the white pieces and Nurassyl plays the Sicilian, and this is the French variation of the Sicilian, preparing for d5, attacking the center. Knight c3 by Magnus, knight c6, pawn push to h3, taking his time. Russell d5 will be quite a good move to attack the center. And he plays d5. So bishop goes to b5, winning the knight against the king. Knight f6, putting in more pressure on the center e4 pawn. Magnus pushes d3, protecting the pawn, and after d4, the pawn is captured, recaptures with the pawn, and now the knight goes to e2 now. So black now got to get rid of, have this problem of this doubled up pawn, and they messed up queen side, and he's yet at least two moves away from castling the black. And he brings the bishop to e7, getting ready to castle. Magnus castles first, and black follows, and knight to g3, bringing both the knights into the king side of Nurassyl. So he's not much happy with his position here. Double up pawns. This knight is basically preventing this bishop and the queen from getting activated. So knight d7, and immediately Magnus pushes e5 here. So queen to c7 and rook e1 now. Rook to d8, but the best move was to go for c4, trying to fix this pawn structure. Knight h5 by Magnus, attacking the pawn on g7 with the knight. Black's pieces are like stuck on the queen side of the board, and now g6 is pushed. Magnus retrieves, and now this creates another weakness here on the f file here, because this pawn is controlling the square, and this is the permanent weakness for black. So knight to b6 again played. Magnus is slightly better. The best move still was to push for c4 and bishop g5 now. So he goes for the trade of the bishop, like that Magnus offered. Knight g5, recapturing. He brings the queen to e7. Even c4 was an option. H6 would be best as well. So queen protects the knight, and it also connects the root. And now he plays c4, and Magnus brings his knight to e4. The other move was to bring the queen to f4 and prepare for putting more pressure on the f7 square. So now h6, knight retrieves, king comes up the board to g7, and this d6 square. Once the knight comes in here, which will come eventually, this is a very, very dangerous knight here, because from there it can cover a lot of squares. Gary Kasparov especially told something like knight on d6 is like one of the most dangerous pieces on the board. Magnus brings his knight to d6, and from this position, this knight is a pretty dangerous piece, and Nurassyl knows this. The 11-year-old understands. He's one of the future players of chess, and he goes for the captures. And Magnus recaptures, but he could have just gone for the capture on d4. And now knight d7, which is a mistake. Pushing in the for c5 was the best, protecting this pawn here, and also fixing up the pawn structure that you had earlier. Probably he realizes what he did right now. So q into f4 now. Eventually Magnus goes for this move, putting in pressure on the f7 pawn. Goes for c5. Magnus pushes b4, and he goes for the capture of that free pawn, and Magnus recaptures the pawn by knight to d4. So this allows the knight to come in here and he brings the knight to b6, which is a mistake, and Magnus is clearly better right now. So this move, knight c6 is on, and Magnus goes for it. So basically the queen is attacked, the rook is attacked, but there's another problem here. There's more pressure on the f7 pawn, so the queen need to be here. Knight d5 is played, attacking the queen of Magnus, and Magnus goes for the sacrificial line, which basically was a blunder. Queen f3 was the best. After the recapture, you can recapture the queen, and once the king comes back, he goes for the capture of the bishop. But the best move for black was to go for the capture of the knight, and after that, knight is attacked and it moves around to c5 now. So Magnus is clearly better now, and attacks the knight, captures, and rook to c1 basically, and you can now capture this particular piece here. Magnus is clearly up by a piece now. They are down to the last few seconds, so Nurassyl is playing for his pride now. Not often you can play with a legendary player like Magnus Carlsen, and the 11-year-old is not giving up, and he's giving the full game for Magnus Carlsen. So we rarely get to see such games from Magnus, because at this level the opponents basically resigns quite early. But Nurassyl wants to play on, so Magnus is just cool, unflinched on what's happening. He just going with the flow. Normally players of such caliber could get annoyed. Blocks the check. Rook goes back. Knight check. Goes in. Blunder. Now we capture the rook, it'll be a stalemate. He's just trying for that, but Magnus won't fall for it. Now he captures the rook, and the game is as good as done, and Magnus Carlsen wins the match. So quite a game by Nurassyl. He played till the last move, and thanks for watching. We'll be back with more such videos of Magnus and other great players.